It's Dan Morgan and Dave Canales' turn in Carolina as number 1 overall pick. Bryce Young enters his second season. How is this team set up? We're examining the state of the Panthers roster today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Joe, I have devastating update for you.
Okay.
Joey the Bear got community notes.
I don't know what that means.
Joey the Bear.
I know about Joey the Bear. I think he's a hoax, by the way.
Well, that's what I'm saying is he got the community notes on Twitter suggesting that the story needs further clarification and that the sources are only Reddit and TikTok and not me. So maybe we didn't have an albino grizzly bear that got relocated a bunch of times.
Kyle, that lived rent-free in my mind, as you know.
I'm glad.
I texted you later in the day. I was like, brother, was this some type of social experiment that you were setting me up for? Or
I sent you what I had.
Right, but like, come on. Like, the whole story was crazy. We're talking about professional animal relocation services taking a bear to the...
I don't think there's ineptitude in every professional...
To the point where you don't know what type of bear it is. Like I said on the podcast, this isn't getting a kitten off the side of the road and finding a home for it. This is a bear. You're tranquilizing it. Like, there are strategies in place that you have to, like, that are not normal to relocate a bear. Helicopters.
In theory, yeah.
Like,
you see the video how they transport rhinos?
I've seen a lot of this stuff, yes.
Where they tie the ropes to his feet and they fly him upside down.
It's insane. Tranquilizing these things.
You see the video of the cow in the Swiss Alps getting taken to the vet and they fly him with a helicopter?
And they strap him in. Yeah, I've seen all this. This is what I'm doing most of the time.
It's like the thing from Jurassic Park, the original Jurassic Park, where they feed the velociraptors in the beginning and they got to airdrop the cow in through the roof of the cage.
I mean, this is insane stuff. That's why I'm like, no, there's no way
this bear got.
And then it's like, oh, this keeps on happening? No.
I do have a good update for you before we get started with the Panthers today.
Okay. All right.
One of the other things we talked about recently in all of our openings, which we've done twice as many in a week as we normally do, because we're recording this Friday show last Friday, or this Thursday show last Friday. I don't even know what day it's the show that we're recording. That's how many shows we've done. Poncho, Steve Austin's cat.
Yeah.
Somebody, you know how all the pro wrestlers had like the Titantron videos that plays like when they walk out on the stage?
I didn't know they were called Titantron videos, but I know that there's like the walkout.
So there was the Titantrons, like the big screen thing. Somebody took Steve Austin's theme music with his old video that he used to walk out on the screen behind him, and every time Steve Austin appeared, they replaced it with something that Poncho the cat was doing. So Poncho the cat has his own Stone Cold Steve Austin intro video.
Well, now that you've also sent me one of those videos, I saw him on his neck while he was trying to shovel horse manure.
Cow manure with one arm.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Between him and Jim McNally, you're just wondering what's going on here.
What you're going to get on Twitter on any given day.
Right. Like, I think twice about sending anything. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, does anybody care about this or whatever? And like, these guys are doing like literally the corniest stuff in the whole world. They're like, you know what? I'm going to tell the whole world that I'm doing this. Keep pounding. Keep
pounding. Welcome.
Pounding. It's Panthers Day. This is the last team preview. We've done 31 of these, and it's time for the Carolina Panthers to get the spotlight. And Kyle Crabbs and I every summer We assess every roster. We watch the film. We study the players. We put every player in the NFL into a bucket. Those buckets are roster cornerstones, quality starter, a rookie, adequate starter, replacement level, quality depth, non-roster caliber, incomplete evaluation, and a practice squad developmental player. Every bucket has a numeric value assigned to it. It's weighted in terms of positional value. And so we've done the work on the Carolina Panthers, and now we're going to talk all about it. So we'll get into the offense first. Kyle Crabbs, Carolina Panthers offense. Your prevailing thought entering 2024?
I'll keep the pro wrestling theme going. Shane McMahon. Do you know who Shane McMahon is? Is Vince's son. They
Okay.
did all the dumb stunts, jumping off stuff with trash cans and stuff.
Yeah, no
His
idea.
theme song starts with "Here Comes the Money" with a cash register.
I've heard of Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man.
Yeah, it's a different money-related gimmick.
Money.
Okay, great. Then we'll do Ted DiBiase. We got a few $1 million mans here that are new to the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
And these investments on this side of the ball, I think you get really excited about. I think you maybe look in a vacuum and you say, hey, in a perfect world, are you paying Robert Hunt $20 million per season? I think in a perfect world, he's maybe getting 13 to 15, but that's the
market is the market, Kyle Crabbs.
That's right. The salary cap growth, the open market with multiple teams bidding on player services. If you're going to spend in free agency for top free agents, you're going to spend about 120, 125% of like authentic value, I think is a pretty common outcome. And for Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt, that for me is so much of where the marriage of what they do well with Dave Canales and how they want to play offensive football. And they want to be a little bit of 3 yards in a cloud of dust sometimes, right? And ideally, you're not running for 3 yards. And I'd imagine if you ran behind these guys a whole bunch, you'll get more than 3 yards because they kick people's butt up front. But that's center for me is holy cow, you spent a lot of money, but also holy cow, I think you're so much better on the like this is an identity piece of this team is this offensive line and what they've now invested in it with what we know Ekwonu is capable of at tackle. I know he didn't have a good year last year. We know Taylor Moton maybe getting closer to the end of his career than the beginning of his career, but can still play at a high level. And now you got these 2 guards on the inside. It's like you should be able to move some people around in this division.
Kyle Crabbs, challenge accepted. I'll keep the wrestling references going here.
Let's do it.
And we'll reference Charlotte's own Ric Flair, the Nature Boy. Woo! Because that's what Bryce Young's saying about having these guards in front of him after last season. What a total disaster, right? Like that offensive infrastructure was not what it was supposed to be, whether it was scheme, talent, guys were injured. I mean, all of these guards, dude, they use like 5, 6, 7 different left guards and right guards. There's no stability. Bradley Bozeman there playing every snap at center. There's somebody different next to him. It felt like on a week-to-week basis. And so stabilizing that is a big deal for Bryce Young, who has his own physical limitations, one of them being very small. You have got to mitigate pressure in his face, and you have to be able to run the football. Damian Lewis, Robert Hunt are going to help you do those things, and they're going to help you stabilize Ikem Ekwonu, in my opinion, who obviously didn't take the year 1 to year 2 step that we were hoping for after he really kind of turned it on during his rookie season. Well, I mean, how's the guy really going to play his best football under with a new coaching staff and a new scheme, but also like literally somebody different next to him all the time, right? We talk about offensive line play being the sum of 5 guys working together as one. And when you have no consistency with those people, it makes it very difficult to accomplish that.
Well, and also Bryce individually, consistency of landmarks for pass protection and where you need to be.
Yes.
A player like that makes it harder for a tackle in the first place, just with how dynamic he is within the pocket to move within the pocket and drift away from pressure and buy himself extra time or scramble or put his eyes down because he's got somebody that's in his face. And it's like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't in a lot of ways, just because of the stress. And that's where I go back to one of Dave Canales' phrases for the offensive line. He talks about mitigating the time under tension for the offensive line in pass protection. And I think for Bryce, I think for the offensive line as a whole, I think they're a lot better in pass protection in general with the talent that they brought in. But if you're also going to catapult that with the scheme and say, we're not going to ask you to play under that amount of stress on a snap-to-snap basis, I think it helps everybody be better.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We've talked about the offensive line. Let's get into skill players. We'll do that on the other side of it, folks, so be sure to stick with us. Well, folks, as you know, Dave Tepper has brought music
Live
to
music.
the Queen City, right? So you can go to concerts. And if you want to go to concerts, you got to go to GameTime to get the tickets, because GameTime is the fast and easy way to purchase tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. The app is awesome. I love it. It's easy to navigate. They give you last-minute ticket specials. They give you flash deals. They give you a picture from your seat so you know exactly what to expect when you get to the venue. But as I keep saying, my favorite part is the all-in pricing. And that's big, right? Like, you always hate that purchase process of at the end you come in with this big processing fee. You don't have that with GameTime. They give you that full cost right from the outset. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Skill group overhauled, which I think is a good place to be. Not necessarily dramatic overhaul, but a very healthy infusion of young talent and a proven player in Diontae Johnson. And would you rather focus on the draft element first, or would you rather focus on the Deontay Johnson element first?
I mean, it's both interesting. They started with trading for Deontay Johnson, so I guess that's kind of domino one. Gives them a separation guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is helpful compared to what they had. And I think he's a very useful addition to this mix. And I think Deontay Johnson kind of gets a bad rap for the drop stuff that happened earlier in his career. I think a lot of that has been really worked out, but this gives Bryce Young a separator. And I think that's the best thing you can give any quarterback, whether it's a young quarterback, an inaccurate quarterback. And I'm not saying Bryce Young is an inaccurate quarterback. I'm just saying the best thing you can give any quarterback, whatever the circumstances are, is a guy that can get open. And Deontay Johnson's a guy that you trust to separate.
Yeah. And I think for Bryce, I had this conversation with Kurt Warner on Locked On Dolphins, specifically talking about Tua and the parallels for the Alabama system. And I know they've had different coaches that have been calling the plays, but their system has generally had a lot of carryover. And then it's just whoever's the play caller has been able to put their own flavor on it. And I know Bryce didn't necessarily have the best of the Alabama history of wide receivers as a supporting cast around him, right? I mean, you think about Mac Jones and Tua, and they had Judy and Ruggs and Waddle and Devonta Smith at one point in time, right? Those are four first-round picks.
Yeah.
Bryce didn't have that, but I think with the scheme that he had and the speed that they had, he was and is accustomed to a little bit of an element of separation to identify as open. And Kurt Warner, when he was on Locked On Dolphins, talked about that as like, when I was with the Rams, with the greatest show on turf, open for me meant I saw separation. And I think for Bryce, your route craftsman is end stage career Adam Thielen last year. And like, who else really ran the routes, right? So for Deontay Johnson to be a guy who is known for his route running, to kind of help further aid that process. And then if the team is going to be focused on running the ball and trying to facilitate heavy box counts, so you get more on one for those guys and they create the separation at the top of the stem, it's only going to help the process in the maturation for him as he tries to reach what Carolina's organization felt his potential was when they made him the first overall pick.
They drafted him a wide receiver, traded into the first round to get Xavier Legette, who's a player both you and I like a lot.
Love him. Love him.
Size, physicality, but there's a completeness to him as a multiple level threat. Excuse me, in my opinion. I love the yards after catch ability, which will be important, right? Like, you want to see Bryce Young getting the ball out of his hands into the hands of playmakers, and I trust Xavier Legette to be explosive with the ball, break pursuit angles, be physical, but also the ball skills are show up down the field with his ability to go get the football. And so I think when you're talking X receiver, I think he really fits that description. And so I know they have a fairly high investment in Jonathan Mingo, but I think Legette can kind of stiff arm him and produce for this football team. And I like the complementary skill sets that exist. You think of Legette, Thielen, and Johnson as your 11 personnel receivers. I think those are very, very good contrasting skill sets to be able to attack defenses in a variety of ways with those three.
For sure. As I think about the rest of the draft class for a supporting cast standpoint, you mentioned Xavier Legette. 2 Texas Longhorns with Jatavian Sanders and Jonathan Brooks. You know what? I just put this together.
Go ahead.
They played where in college?
Texas.
Who's the head coach?
Sarkisian. Steve Sarkisian.
Steve Sarkisian. Where was Steve Sarkisian before he went to Texas?
Bama.
Alabama. Where did Bryce Young play? Quarterback?
Oh, yeah.
Alabama.
Yeah.
Right? So
wow.
Bryce won the Heisman the year after Sarkisian's first year in Texas. But they did have overlap for 2020 when Bryce was there. So just interesting that there's like some level of familiarity with a couple of the skill players within that Steve Sarkisian system and playing. And I think both of those guys, Brooks had an awesome emergence last year before the knee injury.
Like him a ton.
I don't know when we'll see him, but my expectations are high when we do see him. I think he's a really good player.
Especially behind this line.
Didn't we ask Bijan about like who's next to Texas too? And didn't he mention Jonathan Brooks?
Talked about JB, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I think Chub Hubbard's a fine bridge player as somebody who's been a fairly high floor, but not necessarily high ceiling type back. And he's capable of taking the pounding early in the season. And then at tight end with Tommy Tremble and Jatavian Sanders, I think you have a couple of guys who can both really move around. And I think that gives you some nice flexibility for like your edges. If guys are going to play in the slot, if guys are going to play in an H alignment. Tremble, I think with his blocking skills, you can play with his hand in the dirt as well. Where Sanders, I think, is a little bit more of a true like flex tight end. So there's some nice complementary elements there. If you want to invoke and pull some of the concepts that they ran at Texas that maybe Bryce was familiar with the overlap with Steve at Alabama, go for it because Steve likes to run the ball and he likes to take some shots. And you'd expect that with Dave Canales.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for Jonathan Brooks, second round pick, and they were able to kind of move around a little bit and make that selection. And I know that he's got the knee injury and that kind of cloudies things for year one, but I think his presence behind this offensive line, he's the type of guy that I feel like brings a dynamic element. Mm-hmm. And you think about what Rachaad White was with Tampa last year with Dave Canales, and I think Brooks could be a souped up version of that. So be cool to see him stabilize that because obviously Miles Sanders is going to be a miss, right, of a free agent signing. That was a Frank Reich special, and that was a silly contract to begin with, and I think that proved to be true very early. There's not really going to be a great path for him with Hubbard and Brooks if they were both healthy, and so I think you're just trying to get to the point where you can get out of that deal. But Brooks excites me in terms of that dynamic ability in the backfield behind this offensive line in particular. So
you got to like for Jonathan Mingo.
I would hope so. It's a second season and he's a big bodied guy. I think with him, not a route runner, right? So like you're going to want to take advantage of size, speed, and ball skills down the field, winning leverage battles, yards after catch, right? You feel like there's a redundancy there with Legette though, because I think Legette's just a way better version of that player. So I think your hope is that, at some point he becomes a featured part of you, but then you have to also remind yourself, I know Dan Morgan was like the assistant general manager, but he wasn't a GM, right? Right. There's a weird transition here where like you promoted from within, but he also wasn't the GM. And so you're going to see some of that where there's not loyalty, even if they're recent picks because they weren't his picks. And so we'll see how Mingo factors into that. And I think you can already look at a guy like Sanders and see like, okay, we've already kind of made our succession plan there. And I think Dan Morgan wants to kind of do it his own way. And I'm excited for that. I like Dan Morgan. I think that Dan Morgan's a guy that's deserved this opportunity. You just question, okay, can Dave Tepper get out of the way and just let football people make football decisions? And if so, I think that, they'll be in a lot better shape. But I'm excited for the direction. I feel like this is a better situation than last year, even though you were able to talk yourself into this being a decent situation for Bryce Young last year. But there were so many warts in their scheme and how it all came together that put Bryce Young as a rookie and really any quarterback in an enviable position to try to be successful. So
talk about the defense on the other side of it.
We'll talk about the defense on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with us.
What are you drinking there? Coffee, tea?
H2O.
H2O?
Yeah.
In your tumbler?
My Bird Dog's tumbler. Yeah.
Bird Dog's tumbler.
Yeah.
Defensively, like the additions. Again, I think there's some really healthy infusions of talent. I look at Jadeveon Clowney and what he was last year in Baltimore, and I think this coaching staff can have a lot of success with him. I think this is probably the best running mate. Because like Brian Burns was weird last year, right? Like you kind of, Burns has splashed so often, but you've just kind of waited for like the explosion year to happen with him. And I don't know that it did. And at least not in Carolina. So to go out and get a guy in Clowney who I think you can do more with as far as moving him around. I'm not saying he's an overall better player than Brian Burns. And Brian Burns, with the things that he's elite at, I think is better than what Jadeveon Clowney's things that he's elite at is. But a player that you can move around a little bit more and do a little bit more with, I think maybe you can help further flesh out Derrick Brown on passing downs a little bit more too, which is why I really like the Clowney addition specifically for them.
Yeah, I think the pair of Clowney and Wonnum is better than Burns and Gross Matos. Burns is the best player. But I feel like there's at least a reasonable running mate here where I've been watching Carolina and wondering who's going to be the other guy, oppo Brian Burns.
Right.
And, Wonnum comes in after a couple, 2 8-sack seasons in Minnesota. I think could stabilize. I mean, you look across the front, Shy Tuttle, Derrick Brown, Jadeveon Clowney, DJ Wonnum. That's pretty solid. I think the questions with the front is who steps up from a depth perspective. Particularly on the edge. Like DJ Johnson was a reasonably high draft pick that you traded up to get. Can we see something there? Caleb on Chasen, I don't know, man. Like it didn't happen in Jacksonville. And he was given multiple opportunities. I'm not expecting him to be anything here. Amari Barno, unbelievable speed, but he hasn't done anything yet in the NFL. So I think A'Shawn Robinson's a nice depth player on the inside, but what else do we have, right? I think where this team maybe is lacking in the front is the depth, which I guess if you're going to lack depth over starters, but I'm curious to see how that comes together. I think it's also a big deal that Ejiro Evero came back, right? Like,
yeah,
through all the crap last year, like this defense had a lot of bright spots to it. And I think you can look at it collectively and acknowledge that there's some nice talent additions.
For sure. And I think you look in the back seven too, the addition of Josey Jewell. Where was he at before he came to Carolina?
Yeah, Denver, right.
And where was Ejiro Evero before he came to Carolina?
Yeah,
Denver, right? So, so a potential quarterback of your defense, Mike linebacker type, who's familiar with this. That's a nice add. I think they've got a pretty high floor with some of the secondary pieces with a healthy Jaycee Horn. When he's healthy, it's really good. Jordan Fuller as an addition from the Rams in free agency. And remind me, where was Ejiro Evero before he was in Denver? He's with the Rams as a secondaries coach and defensive
Right.
passing game coordinator. Okay. And where'd Jordan Fuller come from? The Rams.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Like the familiarity there, I think is really encouraging for what that's ultimately going to look like for guys who there's a lot of new, but a lot of guys that are new that know what they're getting themselves into and how it's supposed to work.
At corner, man, if Jaycee Horn is healthy, he's so good, right? Like, stay healthy, young man. We want to see you blossom into one of the best corners in the league, which when he's healthy, and I think that's what's been impressive is like he's been in and out, but whenever he's in, man, he's still young and he's really good. The running mate here, Dane Jackson, I'm well acquainted with Dane Jackson. I think Dane Jackson is an unbelievably good third corner. Like you'd love to have that guy play for you when you need a spot start. And the Bills tapped into him a ton. With their corner injuries, particularly Tre'Davious White. I mean, Dane Jackson was never a preferred starter for the Bills over the last 3 years, but he still started 26 games. But now he's stepping into this situation where he's asked to be a starter. And I think there's a professionalism that Panthers fans will appreciate with Dane Jackson, cerebral player. He's going to make some tackles. I think with Dane, what bothered me with him in Buffalo was like never really out of position. But man, I just want to see him win the ball a little bit more. Like he was on the bad end of so many catches. It's like, you're right there, man. Can we make a play on the ball? But hopefully, I mean, he's going to be an important part of this defense, in my opinion. And so I think he's an X factor for this defense.
How high do you think the ceiling can be for Derrick Brown? Plus, played a ton of snaps the last 2 years. I thought he was incredible down the stretch last year. I thought he comfortably played his best ball in the back half of last season, about midpoint on. He was awesome, and the pressures came up. I know the sack production's not really there, but I think it's like 1,700 snaps the last 2 years. He obviously gets a big contract. How high can we go?
He's an ascending young player, right? Like, I think that's what's exciting. He's gotten better every single year, and they gave him a contract. But I think, look at a lot of these players in Carolina, and when you're constantly changing leadership in terms of your coaching staff, it's hard for you to settle in and just become the best version of yourself. And I think if there was anything stable about Carolina, it was Evero and the defense. And I think you saw the benefit of something like that in a guy like Derrick Brown, who I think you can expect an elevated level of play from him. And if this collective rush effort can be better, which I think it can be, that's going to benefit a guy like Derrick Brown. It's if you're the only one getting pressure, man, it's tough, right? For that to matter. Yeah. So hopefully more complimentary pressure, more time on task in this system is going to unlock even more for Derrick Brown.
You do wish, and like we kind of alluded to at the top of this segment, Clowney alleviates some of this a little bit because you can move him around a little bit more, but you do wish that the running mates with the interior defensive line group had a little bit more penetration upside, I think.
Yeah, and I studied Carolina's defense because the Bills signed Shawn Williams, so I wound up watching a bunch of tape on him.
He's a kind of a nice little pain in the butt type player.
Yeah, and like they play him like a 4-eye, 5-tech. Yeah. Sometimes as a nose, I'm like, I kind of like him as a 3, right behind Ed Oliver and having him attack a little bit. And so, I think that it's interesting how they play defense, and I think maybe their personnel is falling in line a little bit more as they've built around Evero and his plan. So I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued. I want to see them. Like, I wish they were a little bit more aggressive with their front, but I think maybe they might have the horses to do that with some of the additions they made this offseason.
Well, it's a competitive division, and I know we've already kind of stacked the whole thing. And pre-quarterback assessment, all of these teams are fairly close from like a final output standpoint. Right. I mean, is the ceiling the highest amongst like some of the other divisions that we've done for a team that might win the most amount of games? Not necessarily, but I think that also makes, and we've seen this the last few years, a really compelling race and whose young guys and new guys can gel the fastest and who's the X factor player that makes the biggest leap. And I think Carolina can look at what they have, and there's questions about the roster, but I think they can consider themselves in that contention, in that race, depending on how things go this season.
Yeah, it's about the quarterback, right? Like,
Right. For them specifically, it's all about Bryce.
Yeah. How can this coaching staff get more out of Bryce Young? And of course, I think there's a better situation around him, but like he's got to play better. And that's we can certainly point to last season and come up with the reasons why, but we got to see a step year 1 to year 2. There's a lot invested there.
That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On NFL Scouting. We are doing the tier maker. Our final tier maker for the NFL 2024 season is coming tomorrow. We'll do the NFC South. All the position rooms, we will put them all into by position room and rank them 1 through 4 and how we perceive them based off the information that we have right now. So that's tomorrow to put a bow on the week. We hope you come back and see us. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys checking out Locked On NFL Scouting. Come back and see us again.